Hi and welcome everyone. So today I would like to talk about basics of modules, and we go into depth of classes. Okay, so now what you can see in here is on the left side you can see my index HTML, and in my index HTML I implemented a script main.js, which is this one, some style sheets and some content. And what we want to create today is we want to build a component which on its own will add a button to this content part. And we're doing this through JavaScript. So in the plain JS, what you can see here is it says before imports, after imports, and start. So this might already give you some idea about what we're going to do. We want to import another file, a module, and use that file in this main.js. And what I want to import is this components.js. So first thing we have to do is to say import, and then we say component from, and this is ./modules, which is the folder, to see the folder structure. And here you can see inside modules I have this component file. Okay, so modules/component.js. Now, if I start this right now, we will get our first error. Let's restart this, and it says import declarations may only appear at the top level of a module. So it's basically saying this file main.js is not a module. To change this, we have to add here, while importing the main.js, and say type is module. Now if we restart the same, we get a different error, but overall you have to remember, if you want to import the first JavaScript file which should use modules and import other modules, then this one has to be a module too. So we are importing the main.js as a module. And in here, it says import component from component.js. Now, to import this, we have to define our component here as something to export, so that the import knows that this should be imported. Okay, so we have to say export default, and then we just adding for now a1. Doesn't matter if this is an object. And now if we start this, everything is fine. It says component loaded before imports, after, and start. Now the next thing to learn is that in here you can see that we wrote before imports before we're importing this, but still it says component loaded before the imports. So basically, I'm not sure if you're aware of what hoisting is. This is something like the hoisting. If that doesn't tell you anything, that's fine. It's always, even if I place it as the last thing in here, it will be loaded first. Okay, so basically JavaScript scans the whole file, finds an import, and says, oh, we have to do that first. But for a good usage, I will always place it on top. So I guess for now we no longer need these two lines, and we are fine to say, okay, component loaded, start. So start runs automatically because I'm saying window on load. So once everything has been loaded, then it will run this function start. That's the way it works here. So now what we can say in here is console log, and we say component. And now if we take a look in here, it says, oh, this is an object, because what we are saying is export this in here, and we import it right here. So component equals to what we are exporting. So another thing we could do in here is, for example, to say I would like to import logger from modules/logger. Now, if I'm going in here now, I can say logger log. The same for this one. And let's take a look over here. Now everything looks a bit different, because what I'm doing basically is I'm saying I wrote a logger which prints some information up front. Then it says which file and which line did call this logger, and then it tells me start. So in here I could say start, comma, component, and now we get something different, because now we get this as a group, and inside the group I get the data. I think this is pretty neat to have, to get more information over time, and that's why I imported this logger. So now that we have this, we can start to work on our component. What we want to do at the end is we want to have a basic span, a div span, which gets inserted right in here in our content. To do that, the first thing I would like to do is to create a class. So if I would just use it once, I wouldn't do a class for this. But over the time of a project, you definitely will have more divs, more buttons and stuff like that. And so that we don't have to rewrite it always, we want to create a class, add some basic information, and everything else should be handled by the class. So the first thing is we write class and component. And in here, this is now our component. We do component, missing E. Okay, so now what we will export is this class. So if I go in here and I say A1, this doesn't work. We have to say A equals 1. And now if we take a look in here, oh, I just removed that. Let me add in here again, logger log, start component. So now what we are doing is we exported the class component, and this is basically what we exported. If we want to make use of the class, we have to say new component, and we create one real component, while this is only the definition of the component. But this will be our real component. So let's head over here and say comma component, and let's compare these two. So the first one says class component, same as before. But this one, as you right now can see, is an object. It's what we created from this one. If you take a look in here, we wrote A equals 1. But this should be at the end an object which we want to have with methods and other parameters and stuff like that. So what we want to create at the end is an object with a prototype chain. As you can see in here, this one has constructor, another prototype, and so on. So the important part is that we want this component at the end to add a span to our HTML. So we do have to pass some items in here. So let's go over here and say const my component equals new component. And in here I want to add a text because the span should display something, and I would like to have the text as test. Just for now, let's just use test. And probably I'm not deleting everything. Let's go with, comp. Yeah, we can just add in here comp. And let's take a look at what we get from this. So empty line in here to keep it readable. And so first of all, if I start it right now, there's no difference. So we need somehow this text to add it to our component. And to do so, we are adding a constructor. And this constructor gets the text. And inside the constructor, we are placing whatever data we get, we want to add and to remember within the component. So it's this dot text. This is our component. And this dot text should be equal to text. Now, if we run this now, we passed the text in our object to text. So basically what we have now is text, and that was equal. So that's an empty string probably, and the constructor fills this with the necessary text. You don't have to do this, but I want to keep it because later on I want to explain our config system with this, so that's why I keep the text in here. Let's just keep a look at it again, and still it's working the same way. So, but now probably I want to add more, because what I have to add is probably the parent ID. Where do I want to add this component to? And in here you can see that I added content as the ID. So in here I would say content, and in here we would have parent ID as probably null for now. And in here the second one would be parent ID, and this dot parent ID equals to parent ID. Now, if you take a look at it now, we can see that we do have the parent ID and the text. If we have all this, we are probably able to add this to our DOM. And to do so, I would like to add a new method, which should be show. And within show, what we want to do, we want to add this to the DOM. I already prepared something. As you can see in here, I added a DOM util and I named it add to parent. So we need an element later on and the parent ID. Let me just grab this, copy, and in here what we want to do is we want to say DOM util dot add to parent L and parent ID. So we are missing this DOM util. And again, what we can do, we can simply import it. As you can see right now, we did not import the DOM util. As soon as I go up here and I'm saying import DOM-util from the /DOM-util.js. Let me remove this, we don't need that any longer. Now, if I rerun this, you can Neo.MJS export default. Okay, so what happened in here is that I only have an export to add to parent. You can go and export a default and import it without any further knowledge. But if you export it as one of many within here, then you have to go in here and say import star as DOM-util from here. Now let's check that again. And in here you can see that we are now importing DOM-utils. So again, if we are importing, what we could do instead of this asterisk, we could go in here and say, I just want to import the add to parent. Let me close this up. We can go with this add to parent from, and then we could use only this add to parent here. But I prefer to use this as this one. Oh, it seems I missed it somewhere as DOM-util. So I prefer to import it as this, so we can import everything from here, even the create and this one at the same time. If I add in here create, so now this one would import both. So we can use out of the box DOM-util.create and do something like that. But we're just using this, but with this DOM-util, I get a pretty good idea where this comes from. Without this, I prefer to go with the DOM-util. So we are missing the element and the parent ID. We do know the parent ID, right? So if we go in here and say parent ID equals to this dot parent ID. So whenever you're within a method here, this is the full component, and this dot parent ID points here. From the constructor, we do know that the parent ID will be added in here to that parent ID. Now, we're still missing the element. So I would go and say we create the element has to be some kind of a DOM component. So that's the next thing we have to create. So we are going for create HTML element. And in here we are saying element equals to this dot create HTML element. And in here we do have to return the element, which we haven't defined yet. So we are going for const element equals to document.create element. I will explain a bit later why I'm doing that in here. Create element this dot tag, and we haven't set the tag yet. So let me go in here and say tag equals to span. So what do we have now? Let's take a look in here. We already have the tag span because we want this later on to be a span. We know where to add it and we know what to add in there. So we are creating an element in here, and the text should be the L inner HTML equals to this dot text. And then just to make it a bit more fun, we are adding in here a base CLS, a class that will be always added to this component, CSS class. Sorry for that. So I want this to be new do minus component. So we want in here to add l.classlist.add this.baseCLS. And with that, I believe we created an HTML element, we added the text, and we added a class to be able to style our component. Now on show, we will create this, and then we will add it to our parent. Let's take a look how this works. In here, in our main, we already created the component. Now that we created the component, we have to show the component. So component.show. So if you take a look in here, just a second, check. If you take a look in here, you can see that we have this create HTML element and we do have our show. And you already can see in here that we added tests, and we can change this to this is all about components. And as soon as we update this, it says this is all about components. So the reason why we create this is that we want to be able to create more than a single span. And now with this in here, we can go and say, okay, let me just remove that empty line there. Typically, I prefer to have that empty line to be able to see where my variable section stops and where my code starts. But for now here, let's go for this and say in here components 2. And we can add in here a B and remove the B. So if we start this again, you can see this is all about components 2. If we take a look in here, we can see we do have 2 spans. Both have new component, and the second one has this B2 with the space in front. So without any problems, we can continue to create components now and add them to wherever we want to. Currently, we are telling our parent ID to be the content, but we could go in here and say D and say this is our component content. So we're taking the component content, and now we can go in here and say the 2 should go for the component content, and the other one again for the component content. So now you can see component content has the 2 in here, and our content has this. So we are pretty flexible, because what we can do now is we can add a couple of information and keep it as that. So what I want to do right now is I want the content to be my default. Let me add in here, this is my default parent ID, and I no longer need this. So now I have the text and in here that. Now what I would have to do is I would have to add the parent ID or this dot parent ID. Let me rerun this and all stays the same. But actually, I would prefer to have in here just data. And I would like to add the data.text in here and the parent ID to be either my data parent ID. So I only have this single data object which I add in here so that I can have how many ever I want to have in here. And for this, I have to add in here, this has to be my text. And the same over here. We want this to be an object. This should be my text. And this should be my parent ID. And I guess that all of you who already worked with XJS on Neo kind of see what this is trending to. And we are only working with vanilla JavaScript. There's nothing else in here. We're just using a component with a constructor and some methods. And out of the box, we can create as many components as we like to. So now let's go here and say this is a button position. And this is my content. Let's say this is a toolbar. So we do have a toolbar on top, and in here I want to have buttons. This is my content, and I want to have some content in there. So now that we are here, let me remove this one. We don't need that any longer. And this one should go to our content parent ID, which is basically my standard. I'm going here again with no. So you always have to add a parent ID. And in here, I'm going to say parent ID equals to content. Keeps it easier to read later on. That's why I'm going back to that one. Just wanted to explain how you could set a preset value, which goes for this tag, for example, which always, I want this component always to be a span. What I could do now is, which is quite easy, to say this.tag equals to data.tag, or to say this.tag. Now I can add in here, let me just check out where we are here. So within the content we have a span. Now I'm adding in here a tag of I. Let's check out. Now we get this with the I tag. So now we do have full control over how to show this, and we can recreate over and over components. And this is just the base component. So now if I want to go and build a button, let me just add in here a new file. In modules, I add a new file, and you can see all of this is vanilla JavaScript. Button.js. Let's add this, please. So with that button, I guess I don't need the index.html and the DOM utils right now. Let's just keep it like that, put the button at the end. So now we want this to be a class again. So class button, and this class button I want to export default button. Now in here I'm saying, okay, let me just import the button from modules button. And now with that button I can say again, let me say const button equals new button, like this. I can say in here button new, and I just have to go in here and say button new, and it always just has to match each other here. It doesn't have to match this name. This is only valid within this file. Within this file, it just has to match these two. Okay, but I'm pretty happy with button in here, so let's go for button. And I want to say button.show. Now what we have, if I run this, we get an error because there is no button show. But I want to reuse this tactic from here. I want to have the button text should be click me. And I want to have the parent ID to be the button content, which we have as this toolbar, sorry. So toolbar. And within this, this is quite the same as this. And the component show is button show, so it's almost the same. And I want to reuse what I did in here. I don't want to rewrite that. So what I can do is I can say, I have this button and it extends component. Now, it doesn't know what component is here. So we have to say import component from, and again, we just saying, we are at the same level now. As you can see in here, we are here and we want to go here. So that's why we don't have to say modules again, but just say component.js. And as of this, we component like this. Perfect. So now everything from within component works for button. And all we have to do, we just had to, so for this, we just have to say, add me to a different parent ID and add the text for click me. So now what we got is, we have this click me as a span. So what we want here, we want the tag to be, equals to button. Let's try what happens now. Oh, you already can see this is a button. So we just extended from components. Still our component is not a tag button. It still is a span. And our button became a button. And this is just because we are extending and overriding the tag. Now we might want to add some more gimmicks, like we have to add a URL where we want to, if you click, something happens, you want to jump there probably. And for now, this should be empty, or just null. The next thing is, I personally would like to have a new base class, base CLS. And that should be Neo.MJS. Let's check for that. And we get a new styled button right out of the box. So we didn't do a lot. We just changed from here our base CLS and the tag. The text we inserted and the parent ID was inserted, so that's basically runs pretty well. And for our button, now what we want here, we want to add an icon. Right in front of click me, I would like to have an icon. So let me add in here an icon CLS. And for now, no, this should be an empty string null. And I want to add, when I create this, the icon CLS in here. So icon CLS, and I want that to be far minus home. Let's take a look why I choose far minus home. This is because I'm implementing in here. If you take a look at the network, you can see that it loads this font awesome CSS. And using the font awesome CSS allows me to choose something from here. And if I say home, it should go for, where is that home? I'm pretty sure there somewhere is this home icon. This is pretty standard usage. Let's go for igloo, shall we? I added in here, I want to see the free ones, and that's why it's filtered only for the free ones. Let me just see if I add in here igloo, and let's check. Oh, we can't see that yet. We didn't. Let's go for that later. And just keep in mind, we want there to be a small igloo in front of the click me. So we are adding this to the button, but now, do you remember when we tried to add something into here, we had to go with the constructor. There are two ways now to go for this. Let's go with this one and see what happens. We will run into an error because it says must call super constructor before using this. So in here, it doesn't know what this is. To ensure that it knows what it is, we have to call super. And we're adding the data. Oh, let's just not add the data in here. And what do we get? Data is undefined. So in here, sorry, data. What happens with the super is it calls this constructor and we have to add the data. So let's see. It works. And do we have to add these three again? Or could we just keep it like this? And yeah, we do. All of this is running at the position of the super. So basically it goes from here with the data, runs this, and it adds the text, parent ID, and tag already. And all that is open is now to add the icon CLS. So this dot icon CLS equals to icon CLS, data dot icon CLS. So let's take a look at what we have so far. Let me go in here and say we want to see our button. And you can see we do have the base CLS, the icon CLS, which already works to get in there, the parent ID, which is toolbar, and everything is fine. So basically, we can see that the super does the job for everything that is done for the component, and we just have to do the additional work. But now, how do we get this icon CLS in here? And that is something where we have to override our create HTML. As you know, as you have seen, the show function already works. The create HTML already works, but this is specific to create something with inner HTML. And we want to add something in there. And in here, for example, this will work as before. We just want to change how to create our HTML element. That's why I copy this, add it in here, and say, okay, now I want to change this, and this overrides the original one. You can, if you want to, create this one to call upon this method from the parent, from the prototype chain. As you can see in here, let me just explain that. Okay, go in here and you see the prototype says So you can see that we do have a constructor and another constructor. We do have our create HTML element and another create HTML and a show. So you can easily see that the second prototype is our component because it comes with everything. It has a create HTML element, and this one overrides it. So what it is doing, if you call on the object, the create HTML element, it will look in, do I have this? Yes, I do. So I'm not looking further. If you go for show, it says, no, I don't. So it goes up the prototype chain and it will find the show on the parent item. So this component. So all we do right now is we into the inner HTML. Let me just go in here and say text equals to icon CLS plus text. That's basically what I want to achieve. To keep it simple, and we can do that. No, yes, okay, so we do not have the text yet, but the text would be this.text. The icon CLS needs to be something that is wrapping the whole thing. So icon CLS equals to, and let's go with I and close that. I again. And in here we are saying our class should be the icon CLS. So the class should be this.icon CLS. And to ensure that we can use it as a one-liner, I'm going around here and change it to these small. It's for me, it's right next to the backspace button. And in here now we can say $, and use my variable, this.icon CLS. And now we wrote the icon CLS plus this text. And let's take a look at what we get now. So text should be this. Let's go in here, and something went wrong. Let me take a look at that. Button igloo, probably. Let me check for the simple one first. The home one. Oh, here we go. Now the igloo seemed not to work. If it doesn't work, just click here, take a look, and it says solid. It has to be FA minus solid. And then we can use igloo. I'm not sure how you spell that. Sorry for that. Still not working. Seems I do not have fast solid in here. Let's, for the sake of it, just go with the home button and have that in here. So this is right now next to each other. Now what we can do, we can go in here and say, okay, I would like to change it in my CSS. So we are going for .new minus button. And inside that we do have the I. And we're just saying margin right 1 EM. Let me rerun this, and now we do have the space in there. Let's go for an EM. Yeah, that looks right. Now, we do have our button with the three states. The 3 states are just because I'm using hover. Active is the click when you actually click it. And I just added 3 different colors like background, hover background, and click background. And these 3 can be found just right down here, and I can use them as variable in my button definition. So that looks quite good. So we can close the CSS. So out of the nothing, we just created with a couple of lines. First of all, we created our component. Then we made sure it shows up correctly. Then we created our button and just extended the component, and everything from component is inside my button here. So these are the overrides, and as you can see, like parent ID, we don't have to use that in here. This is just the part that definitely changes or adds up. So if you take a look in here, we already had the base and the tag. We're presetting new values for that. And for these 2, these are brand new. And oh, the URL. So I missed that. So what we want in here is this URL comes from data URL, and that's basically it. Works fine. Now that we created this, I would like to have this a bit easier to read. And that's why I'm using in here. I'm starting here. I'm saying I would like to have this to be a config. So I'm just taking these here, moving them up here. In here, I'm just saying replace the equal for the double point, replace all, and replace that for a comma, replace all. And now we do have an object in here. And with that, I believe it's a bit easier to read, to see, okay, this is my basic configuration, and parts in here will influence my config in here. So to be able to do that, the first thing I'm doing in here is I'm saying this dot construct. This is something I'm just making up right now. And because I'm making it up, I have to add it in here, construct. And this should be a function. And what I want to do in here is I want to add getter and setter for all config items. And then I want to add config items to my component. Now, I already did write this. I don't want to go into detail over this. I just will copy paste something in here, and it's just saying config is my config, and for each key in my config I want to add something with an underscore, and I want to add a getter and setter for each item in there. Then I want but I'm only doing this if it is not only existent. This is only because if we're going in here and doing the same, it will already run my construct once on all the items from the component. And then I want to add the value from the config to my new key. So let's take a look how that works. We're going in here. I can't really find property base CLS button. Okay, let me just get rid of this for a second and run this. So button is not defined. Oh, here. I pressed the wrong button on my keyboard. I don't need that, and I want here to have the component. Let's take a look at this now. What do we get? As you can see, we get all these underscore items. I just use them to make sure that you know that there is a getter and setter for each of them. So if I go in here, you can see we do have a get base CLS and set base CLS, a get parent and a set parent. So all of these with the underscores do have do have a getter and setter. Now I was just thinking why do I have this here, and I just figured out that is I want to add in here now. I want to set the text and get the tag. No, that was not the case. Let me just take a look. We do have a getter and setter for text. So it is this set text and replace it for this one. And so why do I have the base CLS? Base CLS is here. We do have the Neo component. Oh, I think, let me just make this a bit bigger. So we still have the config, and we can clean up the config at the end. So delete this.config. Let's take a look at that. Now we do have that in here. Okay, now we do have the base CLS, the parent ID, the tag, and so on, which all of them do have the getter and setter. This is, okay, now I understand, yeah. This is that if you're using this kind, you can calculate what it is right now, and you press this button and you can see it is like that. I was used to Chrome, but I decided today to use Firefox, and in Chrome this looks a bit different. It would be text, and then it says, it looks like this in Chrome. So in here you do have these two arrows, and in Chrome it will look like this, and you press on the 3 buttons and you get the result. So yeah, sorry. So as soon as you have these getters and setters, you will get it like that. It looks a bit different, sorry for that. Didn't really prepare it in Firefox. I prepared it today in Chrome, and then I decided to go for Firefox. Yeah, okay, so what do we have here? We now have, we had this as a config, and you do know that these data correspond with this config part. And with the construct, we do get getters and setters for all of these. And that's the beauty of this config, that I can just grab everything that I want to add a getter and setter for, and then we get all these getters and setters. Now, if we go back in here and add this again, we have to say in here, go for the super, and now we have to add a config again. So config equals this, add our 4 items in here, go for, again, we have to replace the equal for the double point, replace, then we have to replace the semicolon for a comma, replace all, and we are good to go with our config. So, but now that we added this, we have to say in here, I want to call this dot construct, to ensure that our new data, icon, CLS, and URL, do get the getter and setter too. Let me just check for this. It's working, and everything is in here. Now, what did we do here? We just created a component. We created, and if we want to create a new button, let's go for that. Let's just say in here, I want a completely different button, and I want this to show up in the component part. So let's remove this for a second and just add a new button. Const button for the component part. I want content in here. I want to say another button, and this one should be info. And now I have to say button component. And let's see, yeah, this one is not working. Okay, did I do something wrong? Button comp, copy. Oh, okay, so now we do have another button with another icon, and everything is a little bit different. It's in a different, it's not in the toolbar. It goes to the content section, and we just created like this, just a new button. And this is only possible because we created this as a class, and we can create as many buttons from this and just have to let the class know what should change. And that's basically all it's to our class system. So we created a component, and from the component we extended a button, and we created everything with a getter and setter in here. And what we could even do, that's even better. Let me just dive into that. In here, where we create the setter, we could go and say, yeah, if there is something like this dot before set text, so before set, and we want to use the key here. So what we do for that is we're just saying if there's a method plus key, then run that method. So copy. If there is this method, then we run it. So we can even have a validation system for that. And if there is something like this before set in our new item, then just run that. And this is probably something that you, if you work with XJS or Neo, then you do know this already. If you go in here, for example, this is the button or component base. Okay, this is a component base. And no, this is the button. Sorry for that. Base. Oh, this is the base button, and it extends the component the same as what we did. It just says here base because it's within the button folder base. And you do have something like a badge which you can add. There's an icon CLS, as you can see, and whenever there's something with an underscore at the end, it has the before set icon CLS, the same that we just wrote. So in here it says after set badge position, and there is something like a before set. Let me just scroll down a bit. Before get icon CLS. So all this is implemented in Neo. The same goes for XJS. You always have the update. Let me just go back here in XJS. Let me just write that down quickly. XJS, that now for us right now, we do have, let me just remove this, the three different ways that we can look at it. And this is Neo. So for us right now, we wrote the before set key. So that would be here for us with the icon CLS. It will automatically take a look if that exists, then run it before setting it. And that's why we go before set icon CLS. And with that, we can have in here the value that we want to set. And in here we say if value something. Doesn't really matter. Let me just add in here brackets instead of this to make sure it doesn't show an error. So we can validate something. For XJS, we have apply icon CLS, and we do have, let me just make this a one-liner. Let me always just have a one-liner, so that you can see basically. This apply icon CLS in XJS is that you validate stuff. And if you want to update it, in the DOM, you have the update icon CLS. For us, we didn't write a second one, and now let's go for Neo, which has before set icon CLS. If there is an underscore at the end in the config item, it has the before set and the after set icon CLS. As you can see, that all these languages, these frameworks, have similar functionality. What we can do right now here is we can say for us, copy, paste, and say, okay, we want to have this after set. And now we do have all these. There's a bit more logic, that's fine. But basically what we just wrote is the same functionality as in Neo, as in Neo.MJS, and just by using plain JavaScript. And all this is now implemented in our own little component class system. And we can use that and create new items just like that. Now, there is one more thing. There is something in Neo and in... Let me just go over how that looks like, for example, this in Neo.MJS, just to write that once. That would be xdefine, and within xdefine, you add a name within a namespace. Let's say this is my test app, and within view, I want to define a component. Let me just add in here source, because we are creating a component. Then after that, in here, you would have something like this, and you would say extend and whatever you extend it from, and then you would give it a name and a config. So that's basically how that works in Neo.MJS. In Neo, sorry, this. So in Neo, we do have Neo.create. So once you define something in Neo.MJS, so this one is equal to this class system. It works in a lot of points exactly as my class system here, with a config and stuff like that. For Neo, then you can say xCreate, and you just create, for example, the same thing, copy, paste, and here you would just say, I create this, and I want the icon CLS to be far minus igloo. So that's the way you do that in Neo.MJS. In Neo, we already created the class, so all we have to do in here would be Neo create, and then you can say component, you imported the component, and then you say Neo create component, comma, and you would just say, okay, icon CLS should be like far minus home. And this is exactly the same as what we used in here with this part. It's only a two-step functionality. Basically, what Neo create is doing, it says, create me a component from the class and then add these afterwards to my component. But overall, there's not a lot of difference between what we just did and what these frameworks are doing. And that's basically all I have to tell you for today. We created a full component system with a couple of lines, just using this construct to get the getter and setters here, to add what the changes from the norm to our component, especially here where we added the icon CLS. We can add the URL here to our create HTML element, and we can create a lot of different stuff like input fields. We just would create a new class, which is called text field, for example, or field as a basic field, and add some logic which we want to push into the DOM and not care about that later on. And in here, what we do get is, oh, I missed something. I typically would go in here and say this dot element equals to this. This is just like instance. Some call this instance. I would go in here. Oh no, sorry, wrong place, not here. Create, sorry, here. This dot element equals to element. So in here it would be the instance, but in here we do have the DOM element and we save it to our component. So later on, if we call upon that component, we can manipulate the element the way we want to. Okay, so I guess I gained some speed while talking. I guess this is mainly because I had so much stuff I wanted to share with you. And I think it's so interesting to see that it is basically the same as in Neo from the structure. You just use the constructor, which is something that comes with the class system in the ECMAR6 JavaScript. Then we explained the import and export. So in here we import the component because we want to extend from it. And at the end, we export it as the default. Exporting as a default, we can say import button or component from, and we do not have to say import something as component. That's because we were using the default in here. Then what was the first problem we ran into? Let me just go into apps, plain.js, the index HTML, that we have to define the script, the initial script, as a type module. Otherwise, we cannot import anything into it. And if you're interested, just let me know. This logger I created as a singleton. It's a class 2, and I created it. If you want to see something like that in the future, how to create a singleton or something like that, we can go in depth over that.